Fantastic. Okay, I'm very pleased that Gary decided to mention Purim at the start of this because I wanted something like that to be said because it's noteworthy, necessary to say, and in a roundabout way, I want to say it's going to actually tie in a little bit to what's going to come up tonight, which is always nice when that can happen. So I can tell you that this morning at the school, when our school does devotion every morning when we start the day, I'd asked the person who was supposed to do their devotion this morning if I could swap with them, which they didn't mind, which was fantastic. And I mentioned Purim. I mentioned it. And look, let me tell you, when you look across the room and these people know that I'm somewhat unpredictable and they're not really sure what to make of me, I guess. Um, but I'll say this, I saw a lot of nervous faces, a lot of, there was a little bit of awkwardness because part of what I did was I stood up with my Israel since 1948 shirt on, put my talit on just around my neck casually, and put my kippah on as well, just for the while I was talking, and I could see that it threw some people, and I think it does it for a few reasons. And one of the main reasons tends to be is that Christians don't really know, unless they've been educated appropriately, don't really know what to do with Jews in general. They don't know what to do with us. And I think more specifically, they really don't know what to do with a Jew who actually says he loves Jesus. That is just a real mind screw, I think. So, it was concerning to watch, but very telling. I mean, if I was filming from the front, it would have been a shocker to show you what looks, not that everyone was upset, but definitely there were some people who just didn't know what to do with it. And I think, I don't really take it all that personally because when you're not educated in the fuller picture, then what other results should you expect? And I think that's why tonight's even more inspiring for me because my mission tonight is actually very simple. I don't want to get heavily theological or anything. I literally want to take on a very simple but very subtle and dangerous little naughty, sneaky fox that, gets into the crops kind of thing. And that's the idea of, so what's this relationship between Jesus and Moses? Because it's a big one. And it gets spoken about so often. And I believe, sadly, that both Jesus and Paul get misinterpreted very often in Christian contexts. And again, it just comes down to that thing of when you don't really know what you're talking about, then you can make these mistakes. And I know that we are starting to get viewers of this content online, which I'm grateful for. And we know that it will be around for a long time. So part of my mission, and let's see how well I do tonight again, is I'm intentionally going to try and start making the teachings a little bit shorter. I don't want to cut off the discussion period because I think that is of such value too. So it means that my talking time must get even much shorter. So I'm deliberately on that mission. So I will try not fail tonight and into the future, just hone it down more, not try and, I don't want to say put too much in because I think there's just endless supply, but just try and meet this requirement because I don't want people looking at videos that are just way too long and they lose interest in watching it. So let's see how that goes. Let's hope that we can find that good rhythm, especially for the new people that I know are starting to take interest in what they can find on the YouTube channel and that. So let's get into it. Jesus or Moses, and then Jesus, one man leads to another. Part of the inspiration for this is, of course, leading into the Passover season. So that's definitely part of what's on my mind, the inspiration for what I'm doing here. And not just that, because it doesn't just need to be the Passover season for us to have value in doing this. Just generally, the theology that, sadly, again, I'm going to say in Christian minds, splits Jesus and Moses. I don't think it's necessary. So I'm going to do my best to make this simple but very clear, and can't wait to hear what the commentary will be when we get done with that now. So I thought the best way to the best way to get into this right at the start, since we're talking about this idea of, what's the relationship with Moses, with Jesus, with Torah, with the gospel, with the cross, with what Jesus came to do, with the Bible, with covenants and the church and Israel. And oh my word, we can go all night just coming up with these different references and whatever. As I thought about it, I've heard a lot of people talk about this from both sides of the fence. I listen to Jews who are anti-Jesus because they're actually just anti-Christian, actually, and so they just take their shots at Jesus then too. Because you got to know most of the Jews who take these shots are, ironically, at least in terms of Jesus, at least in terms of Jesus and Paul, as uneducated as the Christian side, who are fiercely, passionately creating a different Jesus and a different Moses, effectively, I guess, when they have them pitted against each other. So both sides of that fence has the same problem. Um, they are messing with this whole story, and there's confusion on both sides. On the Jewish side, that's passionately trying to do everything it can to separate itself from Christianity. And of course, the one thing they have in common with Christians is you've got some Christians doing the same from the other side. And Nandi can tell you that I'm actually having what might be actually a very decent conversation with a Christian on Quora who's taken offense to some things I said about the separation of Jesus from Christianity as such, calling it an institution, Christianity, which it is. And you can tell the passionate hopefulness in a Christian like that, because he first actually acknowledges that I'm right by saying, "Oh, Christianity has done this wrong and that wrong," and then goes on to say how Christianity gets done right. And I'm saying, and I answered him, and I kind of said in a nutshell, well, the thing is, you rightly note what Christianity gets wrong, but what he's confusing himself with is to understand that puts him on the wrong side of Christianity as a Christian, because he's starting to see what's wrong. But of course, the subjective opinion won't let it see. So he's going to save, well, I don't mean this rudely, but he's one of those people, and I've met a lot of them, that are going to save Christianity within its own context. And that's a literal impossibility, of course, because the irony is, the more you do acknowledge Israel and Jesus and covenants and know that God's not done with the covenants or with Israel, the worse the worst version of a Christian you tend to be. And that sounds sarcastic, and I said it to this guy in the Quora comment as well. um, I said to him, "You're a bad Christian," and that's a compliment, actually. And then I tried to explain what that means, so I'm still waiting to hear his response to that. Nande, what are your thoughts on that? Because you've now read that article. I mean, you've read that, you read what he wrote, you read how I responded even the last time, and you said you enjoyed it. What is it that you picked up, that because you said to me you really enjoyed it, was a good read? What was it that got your attention with that?
Just really, I think, I think maybe out of hundreds of people you've debated, had a dialogue with, probably I could count people in one hand who were civil and disagreed with you, but were open to being wrong, or even open to having genuine dialogue. And this guy seems really, you know, he understands that it's what you've always asked of even the Jews or Gentiles. Like, we can disagree, but you want your disagreement or your opinion or what value doesn't mean that you are more above me. Like, like
Right,
you don't get disqualified for being a Jew just because you believe in Jesus, or you don't get disqualified for being a follower of Jesus just because you hold on to Judaism, which is on the other Christian side.
right,
This guy disagrees with you, but he's willing to be wrong, and he even understands where you might know more. When he says, "I'm confused with the whole, there's Israel, but you guys call yourself Jews."
yeah,
That's a valid question. I think even you recognize that. Like, he's actually thinking about this and noticing the contradictions not on his side, but even on the other side of Judaism, and he's inquisitive.
right,
So I think that was it's I'm really looking forward to that dialogue, because it's not so toxic, and you're not having to put people in their place, Jew or Gentile, which which is fine for me to a degree. But I think even for you, you're more interested in genuine dialogue on call
Yes, of
and
course.
genuine disagreement, but being civil, and he's being civil really.
Right.
I hope he doesn't run away.
Yeah, no, let's see if he comes back. I think he will because he seems intrigued. Okay. Um, let's move on. Before I move on, let me actually just make this clear now. My reason for using the untangle this analogy here that's on the screen is very simple. I'm suggesting to you that you cannot possibly untangle Jesus from Moses, from law, from Torah, from Tanakh, from the so-called Old Testament, from everything that's going on. The Gospels are in this ball, in this mess. Well, not mess. I don't mean for it to be a mess. I'm actually using the entanglement here in a positive way to say you can't untangle this. And that's okay because it's not meant to be untangled. It's not a mess. And I think that's what again tends to be this, like everyone's got this major aversion to Jesus and Moses being connected and Jesus connected to the law. And you got, as I said, both extreme sides. On the Jewish side, the hatred for Christianity or the offense at Christianity for what it's done. And then you got from the Christian side some assumption that they're going to rescue Jesus from Judaism. We really, again, I would say to the non-Messianic Jews who I often deal with on Quora, I can give the entanglement analogy to them too and say Jesus in those Gospels and Paul and Revelation is entangled in the prophets, in all of that. You're not going to untangle it, and it doesn't need to be untangled because it's one thing. So I think that's kind of my mission here tonight, to show you that Jesus and Moses are one of the same essence in what they're doing, and they don't need to be untangled, so to speak. So that will be kind of my goal. It's not going to be intense. I don't want for it to be intense. I'm actually deliberately going for that, keeping it mildly academic, but at least still easy to follow, I guess, is what I'm hoping for. So, a perfect little trio here that is well worth looking into, and I think often does get looked into um, in Christian circles as well as Messianic Jewish circles, is the idea of Adam, Moses, and Jesus. I mean, anyone can see that there's connections with these characters. Of course, we know that Moses is going to be writing about Adam and of himself, his own time. That's what he does. And then obviously Jesus comes much later. And now immediately when we've got the Moses and Jesus in the same, I can almost like see I could almost see both extremist Jews and extremist Christians clenching their knuckles and grinding their teeth. The ones trying to defend Moses and the other ones trying to defend Jesus, as if these two are at each other's throat. And again, like I'm saying to you, by the end of tonight, my hope is for the live audience that's with me tonight and with people who would listen to this afterwards to realize there's not a conflict between these two men. So that's where I want to go. But for now, what we want to do is just kind of draw a little simple blueprint of these characters, which is not necessarily going to be for the people who have been teaching in RBS for a long time news, but it's just a nice refresher for you to see the bigger picture of what we're trying to do here. So we've got Adam, which when you look at it closer, we're not going to get into this deeply now. If there is interest, we can make time into the future to do something like this. I'm going to give you the nutshell here, is that Adam, I see he has the difficulty though. Not so much for Jews, though, but for Christians, it would be a difficulty to see Adam as a priest and king, because you'd probably never seen presented as that when you're in a Christian, especially evangelical setting. And the reason is simple. Adam is really just the poster child for the rap over the knuckles, naughty boy. Now we're all excited because Jesus is coming. And I don't mean for that to sound as sarcastic as it probably does, but that does pretty much denote the summary of how Adam is presented. He's just the guy that screwed it up while we wait for the guy that won't screw it up, which obviously is going to be Jesus. But in a Jewish context, in Moses' thinking, it's a lot deeper than that. There's so much more going on. And again, we probably can't get into a lot of that, which I'd love to get into tonight because it would just take too much time and I would be distracting from just keeping this more about Moses and Jesus in this context. So I'm going to say to you for now, I guess the question can be asked if we've got time in the comments afterwards. What do I mean with this priest king story? And can I give a little bit more evidence of that? Just for now, just assume that you believe me, or I'm going to assume that you're going to believe me until skeptics prove otherwise or ask more. We've got Adam as the priest and king picture. That's what Moses, I'm telling you, that's what Moses is trying to do in how he presents the content of Adam. And logically, you can immediately, it's tempting and it's okay to do it. Your mind is immediately going to move towards Jesus, not in the gospel so much because he doesn't present himself so definitively in either one of these contexts. And that's important to note because he didn't do it more when we hit Paul and Peter and John. That's when that revelation gets made known in a prophetic sense, which is highly complex, of course, even though Christians wouldn't see it as highly complex, but that's only because they take that to be the base assumption without, again, realizing just what a paradigm shift and way blowing open of way new revelation. Not, and when I say blowing open of revelation, I don't mean to blow away what was there before, adding to what was there before. And I think that's part of the reason why Moses and Jesus end up getting at each other's throats in Christian theology and in anti messianic Jewish minds as well. The same obviously happens because of those polarized views from either side of that fence. So priest king, not difficult to see Jesus there. What's not difficult even for Christians to see for Moses is the prophet imagery. So Christians generally will see Moses as the prophet, and that's fine because he was. There's no question about that. And we're actually going to do a little bit of a reveal of how Moses was a prophet, even in Scripture. I haven't put it on here, but effectively, obviously, for within Judaism, we also call him Moses Rabbeinu, our teacher, our leader. It's obviously a loving, endearing term to suggest someone who is a leader, the great leader, and obviously it's where we generally would get the notion of a rabbi being a teacher. So he's that too. And again, that what's interesting is obviously Jesus could be seen as a prophet. He was a prophet too. But also Jesus, ironically, like Moses, and here's one of the examples we get to make so obvious, is that Moses, like Moses, Jesus was a rabbi too. So, and that is worth noting. But let's look at now what roles do people like me, Messianic Jews, believe Jesus fulfills? Um, Prophet, absolutely, I believe that. Priest and king. So, of course, as I move through that, maybe non-Messianic Jews can still accept Jesus as a prophet if they can see foretells the destruction of the temple. They might still, you might find some that will accept him in that perspective. But when I go to priest and king, that's where it's going to get uncomfortable for them. And let me just say this, the only reason why they'd struggle with the king idea is not because they think it would be impossible for someone like Jesus to actually become the heir of David, because that could be the case. The obvious reasoning generally will be because, well, he's not currently sitting on David's throne. And in a really, block off just that one issue on its own, that is not an absolutely absurd notion to consider. Obviously, there's more to that story. There's missing elements in their logic, and they wouldn't have been taught Jesus friendly storylines when they go to the synagogue and when they're learning with rabbis, because there's just a predisposition to reject Jesus or to see Jesus as a heretic. So, but there's reasoning behind that too. And I'm not going to attempt to get into that. The point is, yeah, we've got the picture. We've got these three key figures. We've got Adam, we've got Moses, we've got Jesus. These guys have something in common. They are heroes of the faith. They are key characters. They are pivotal characters in the grand design and the story that's playing out. And they share very much a lot of attributes with each other between them, um, which if a person could spend the time doing, we could draw up columns that would show the principles of how these three men definitely shared character traits. And look, obviously for Moses, the point in talking about Adam so clearly in the beginning was to um, lay the partial foundation for the storyline of what he's trying to do for Israel. And it's a complex story. I've written about this before. I've taught on this before. So I can't go into that fully, but obviously to suggest that Adam appears in Genesis 1 to 11, which, as you know, I teach is the history of the world before the Jews. And he writes that for a very deliberate reason. It's an apologetic. It's a ministry of undermining paganism, so to speak, as I've said to you, that he meant for his generation to grasp. Now, remember, The generation that leaves Egypt with Moses would have had other information too. They'd have been familiar with the other legends, stories, the midrash that that Jewish families have been studying and learning for generations. And oftentimes, as I've said before, when you read in between the lines in certain areas of Moses' writing, you can almost see that there is context that he's not deliberately spelling out in what he's writing, that when you comb through the broader base of Jewish historical literature, you find the links. Again, I can't get into that now. Point is, again, these three men are connected, and the relationship is not negative. Yes, Adam screws up. There's no question about that. Um, but Adam was loved by God, and grace came to Adam. Even after the sin of Adam and Eve, grace came. So it's also unfair to make Adam and Jesus enemies. Jesus gets called the second Adam, yes, but that doesn't undermine the existence of the first or suggest that the first never mattered to God. God loved Adam, as God did love Moses. And yes, Moses screwed up too, but it's dangerous to start taking these other two men's failures at various times and can I use for lack of a better term, crucifying them for it, and meaning that in a negative with no positive context to it. Because I think that's part of the problem that inspires this teaching tonight, is to say we must stop making enemies of characters that weren't enemies, which is probably the perfect time to give the interlude into this. The fight that never happened. Okay, and this is a big one. The fight that didn't happen. Now, I'm going to tell you now that this is where I'm holding my attention in to the relationship between Moses and Jesus. Now, again, mainstream, and I know there's branches of Christianity that would cut away from this and not hold to this view. And that's why I'm saying to you, if you're one of those Christians, then your Christian badge is fading, and you should probably consider giving up membership if you are not part of the party that's believing this fight between Moses and Jesus existed, which it obviously didn't. So I'm going to show you evidence of that. And how, what better way to show the evidence of that than to show what Jesus says about Moses. So here in John 5, verse 46 and 47, do not think that I will accuse you to the Father. There's one who accuses you, Moses, on whom you have set your hope. For if you believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote of me. But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe my words? I can't possibly move on without getting some commentary from you guys on this. So I've just said, let's just go back to it. I said the fight that never happened, and the biggest fight that Christianity has in human terms with human characters in scripture has to be Moses and Jesus. And Jesus comes to defeat, what Moses did. And what Moses did is old and it's out, and Jesus comes to do the new. Um, I'm just asking, can I get some commentary here? Here's John 5, verse 46 and 47. Does this sound like Moses and Jesus are fighting? But I'd love to get some commentary on anyone that's online, your thoughts on this.
No, I was just going to say, uh, so basically Moses is the first redeemer, and the Torah speaks. There's shadows everywhere in the Torah of the future redeemer of Israel. So there's no clash in this point that's been made. It's basically just as for me, it's like, well, if you believe in Moses, you should be able to see me within the writings of Moses, but you don't. So you're going to be accused by Moses. I guess that's how I see it.
Sure. So the question is, Gary, what do you think? Does this scripture suggest to you a fight between Jesus and Moses, like they're on the opposite sides of the fence, if you read this?
Not at all.
It seems clear, huh?
I don't see any personal grievance with Moses, because then in the same consistent flow, then Jesus should then not be telling people to go who were healed to go show them to the priest, which is directly from Moses. So I think if there was an issue there, he would just say, no, you're not going to go do that. You're going to stick with me because I hate Moses.
Yeah,
I mean, that's just logical.
it's easy enough for him to have done, and yet he does exactly the opposite.
He actually goes out his way. So it's almost an object lesson to say, well, look, I respect the system. I, I come from the system.
Right.
So therefore, follow the system.
That makes good sense to me. Nande.
Yeah, sorry, it's just the Wi-Fi is bad on my side, so you're kicking a bit. So I didn't hear you the first time. But yeah, no, for me, it sounds like Jesus is almost saying, and this would even go not just to the non-messianic Judaism side, but even the Christian side is like you can't separate Moses and Jesus. It's like that's what he's tying himself to even more. Yeah, you read this, you're like, oh flip, if we do away with Moses, we're doing away with Jesus, doing away with Jesus because he says do not. If you don't believe Moses, um, you don't believe Moses, you don't believe me. And then it goes, if you don't believe me, you don't believe Moses because they tied together. He can't contradict Moses.
So
That would disqualify him completely.
it is actually literally that simple. And again, now this is where the analogy of the getting entangled comes in. Because now you see every person that hears us say this now has to wrap their heads around the fact that they believe the law is evil and Torah is evil and it's this old thing and it's this bad thing. But again, because they don't realize all the entanglement and the Moedim and the pictures of Jesus there, and the picture of Jesus as Moses and the picture of Jesus as Adam, if that's all a problem, why is Paul using it? Now is he using it positively? So the contradiction and the problem is with that uneducated perspective in the Christian's mind, of course, which they don't take the time to realize is their problem and not actually a problem with the text. And again, that's why I'm not putting another verse on here because do I need another verse? I mean, yeah, Jesus says the one that's going to accuse them if they don't believe in Jesus is Moses. I don't need to say anything else. If you have a general understanding of English and your brain's functioning, it speaks for itself. And that's why I'm going to let it just speak for itself. I don't need to add to that. So, what I'm going to do next, rather, which is going to be interesting, is to say, let's like backtrack, go with Moses, and see what did Moses experience when he walked with Israel. See, here's the thing: was Moses getting a tattoo of the Ten Commandment, like tablets on his arm, and like just like this is it, this is everything God's going to do. I'm just so into this. This is the way it's going to be. Because I think, again, that's how Christians see it. Like Moses set himself up as some franchise that he didn't ever want to see removed. And all these Jews are now like kind of every Jew's got some like trade stock in Moses. And if Moses gets down for Jesus, then they lose the money that they've invested. I think that's how Christians see it. And then that just fuels this versus Jesus versus Moses story. So why don't we go and just take a quick, simple look at maybe what did Moses see? And I think this is going to be eye-opening. So I want to do that quickly. So I'm going to suggest that Moses had very low expectations of Israel. Oh, can you imagine that? I'm suggesting Moses had a low expectation of what Israel would achieve in our purpose in bringing the Messiah, reaching the promised land, making good on the covenants God has with us to get done what we must get done. I'm going to suggest that Moses had a low expectation of us, his own people, for that. I'm going to suggest to you that as a prophet, Moses knew we were going to fail before we even failed. Now, that's a big statement. Let's see if I can prove it. Okay, so Deuteronomy 31, verse 24 to 29. When Moses had finished writing the words of this law in a book to the very end, Moses commanded the Levites who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord, take this book of the law and put it by the side of the ark and the covenant of the Lord your God, that it may be for a witness against you. Check that out. So the law is a witness against Israel. Now that's interesting because Paul speaks like that. So now the Christians tend to think, oh, you see, that's Paul saying the law is rubbish and he's blowing a raspberry between his lips with his tongue and saying, screw the law and, spitting on it, whatever. So that's what Christians do. But the irony is Paul's actually repeating Moses' words in terms of it being a witness against us. For I know how rebellious and stubborn you are. This is Moses talking. So first, let's go again. Moses is saying, I'm going to use this covenant, this law that I've written is a witness against you, Israel. Does that sound positive? Moses is actually almost looks like he's betting against his own people. For I know how rebellious and stubborn you are. Behold, even today, while I'm yet alive with you, you have been rebellious against the Lord. How much more after my death? Assemble to me all the elders of your tribes and your officers, that I may speak these words for their ears and call heaven and earth to witness against them. Again, this is not like on their side. This is like you guys are going to screw this up. I'm telling you now. For I know that after my death, you will surely act corruptly and turn aside from the way that I've commanded you. And in the days to come, evil will befall you, because you will do what is evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger through the work of your hands. Now, this is one of the prophets you are not going to find on the prophet circuit for churches nowadays. Bethel doesn't produce these prophets somehow. I don't know. But clearly Moses was one of them. So Moses is all out saying, what the hell? You guys are going to screw this up. Put that covenant, put the law I'm writing there with the Ark of the Covenant. Let it never be said that you didn't know that you were going to screw up. Any thoughts on that? So get what I'm saying, and this might change your perspective on Moses. I'm telling you that Moses had a low expectation of Israel. Like Moses knew we were going to screw up. Moses knew that the covenants were in danger of being breached and broken multiple times because Israel was going to screw up. So I'm still saying to you, Moses had a very low expectation. Now, here's the interesting thing. Moses wouldn't be a very good salesman, would he? A salesman that's not believing in his own product or the people he's selling it to, that's not a good salesman. So Moses is the guy that gets the law. He is the prophet. He is the teacher. He is the one that leads Israel, that helps Israel become a nation and gets a constitution going within between the covenants and the writings. And yet Moses is saying, okay, you guys are going to screw this up. There's no question. I call heaven and earth as a witness against you. Get that law I've just written. It's going to stand as a witness against you, that you are going to screw up and let it condemn you. Now, again, the question you've got to ask yourself, and it's the same mistake Christians will make with Paul, is to say that just because Paul acts like Moses, talking like Moses, and I'm hoping you're seeing this now, that Paul's talk is going to look more and more like Moses, actually, where he's kind of throwing his hands up and saying, well, I tell you what can we say? The law is going to screw us all over because we're just going to screw it up every time. The point is not the law being wrong. The point is the people who can't keep it. That's the point. Moses' point was that. And guess what? Paul is not saying a whole lot that's new. Paul's picking up on Moses' talk as a Moses follower, I guess, if you want to call him that. He has to do that. He does do that, and he has to, because he has no other choice, really. And I'm suggesting to you, Paul didn't bring up something new to say, oh my word, the law's not going to save the day. That wasn't original. This is what, again, when Christians talk, I'm like, what are you reading? Or better yet, what are you not reading? Moses said this. Moses knows the law won't win the day. Now, knowing that the law won't win the day, does that mean Moses hated the law? It doesn't mean that. It just means that, sorry, let me just go back there. I don't know. Okay. So Moses, knowing that the law won't win the day, doesn't mean he hates the law. It just means he's realistic and he's like, well, this isn't going to work. Now, Moses is not an idiot. So you can bet that Moses is like desperate for God to show what will work. Because like, okay, God, we're not going to keep this law well. I've watched your people. They're not going to get this right. So we've got to have another way to do this. And you know that, again, can I show you again where Paul is not original, where Paul says he wishes he could be cut off for the sake of his brethren, for the sake of Israel. That's not originally Paul's words either. That's Moses. So Moses wants to see Israel saved. Moses wants to see Israel saved, and he stands in the gap for Israel before God. So he doesn't hate Israel either. So that's a lot of misconceptions that I think it's presented by Christianity again. So let me prove the point here that Moses knows the law won't win the day. And I'm going to use Numbers 11:29. But Moses said to him, are you jealous for my sake? Would that all the Lord's people were prophets, that the Lord would put his spirit on them. And Now, if you recall, this is one of the incidents where people were prophesying, and some people are getting jealous and upset on Moses' behalf because God has given his spirit to some other leaders in the camp. And Moses is like, what? Why would you stop this? Let God speak to everyone. And why? I need to ask this question, and please don't go silent on me. Tell me why you think Moses would prefer that the spirit would go on to everybody and not just himself. Someone tell me why you think that is the posture Moses takes. Because effectively, it kind of puts him out of a job. Now, forget the idea that Moses didn't want to be a leader. Forget that logic. That's not even on the table here. There's a different reason why Moses would want everyone to have the Spirit on them. Why do you think that is? If everyone has the Spirit,
D, wouldn't it be?
yeah.
Wouldn't it be if the spirit is upon them, more people will receive the spirit, they'll be able to keep the law better.
Ah, there we go. Now, Nandi, why does that sound familiar?
It sounds like Pentecost. It
That
sounds like the Messianic kingdom also.
That it does, indeed. It also sounds like Jeremiah 32 and 33, where a new heart,
Is that not
I'll put my spirit
the
in you.
new covenant?
That's it, Gary. It's the new covenant. Imagine that Moses predicting the new covenant before it's even a whiff of a possibility. Isn't that interesting? So, what do you think Moses is praying for in between writing the law? He's petitioning God for this to happen. Because if everyone has the Spirit, guess what? Guess what? You wouldn't need a written law. Doesn't that make good sense? You need a written law because the evil man needs a not a safety net, a harness, a channeling, a rigid control from the outside because he's a wild beast that cannot be contained from the inside yet.
D,
Yes.
I've got a question here at the Mazwai household. Um, what's the difference then? Why can't we? Because we technically, according to the apostolic writings, have the Spirit now, but we struggle. So what's the why can't we keep Moses' law? Or should I even say Israel per se at this very moment?
Brilliant question. Can we put pause on that question because it's going to come up a bit later? And if I don't remind you that now is the time I'm going to answer it, will you remind me before we stop this? Can we do that?
You've got a deal.
Because I've got the perfect time to address that issue, and I might have preempted that question. Who knows? We'll have to see if I did. So let's move on because I think we're going to get to that point. I'm going to show you further reason why Moses knows the law itself as an inactive agent, just as an accuser, literally, it's a witness, he's already told you that, is there to actually, what Moses soon figured out, quickly figured out, the more I write into law for these people, the more guilty they look. Can I say that again? Moses' logic quickly got to the point where the more rules I put in place on God's behalf, the guiltier I am making these people because there's more for them to screw up, which he concludes they inevitably will, which is not new. So again, and I want to cry with frustration when I hear Christians tell me that Paul uncovered some major new thing that the law makes people sinners. No, Moses said that. Paul's just repeating Moses. It's not new. That's why I never get the idea with this New Testament. It just makes no sense to me. But anyway, I want to show you that even as close to home as Moses and Aaron themselves, there's a dropping of the ball. Numbers 20, verse 12. And the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe in me to uphold me as holy in the eyes of the people of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them. That is some harsh, harsh punishment. You know, Moses and Aaron, okay, maybe Aaron did a lot worse than his brother did, but Moses, I mean, geez, the man really didn't do as much bad as Aaron or the rest of Israel. And for his little slip up, he loses the honor of leading the people into the promised land. So guess what? The law, like, was a witness against Moses himself. And Moses knows this. You got to know Moses is writing this. So this man is desperately honest about even himself and his own brothers failing. He doesn't hide it. So Moses is outrightly convinced that Israel does not have the ability to keep the law. Now, please put that in your head while you think of how Christians talk about Jews, that Jews think we can keep the law. Like we're just going to always keep the law, which is retarded. That is not even possible. Any Jew that's ever read the Old Testament has to know that Jews can't keep the law. So that doesn't work. We love it. What I mean is can't keep it, meaning like we can't keep it perfectly, meaning that therefore, since we can't keep it perfectly, it clearly can't purify us perfectly because we screw up. That's why we got Yom Kippur. If we thought we were keeping it perfectly, we wouldn't need Yom Kippur. But anyway, I don't want to get caught up in that, but it's daft logic, really. Um, it's so one of our things I always tell critics, like, oh, how can you trust the Bible? My answer is always, it's just so damn honest. The history of Israel, it's just so honest. It's so embarrassing. It's so revealing. How would I not trust it? It's not hiding anything. And that's part of why I trust it. So that's the thing there. So what have we covered now? Moses, like, has a very low expectation of Israel's success rate of what they're going to achieve because he's just watched one generation. He's like, no, we can't do this. We are not going to get this right. We better find some other way of getting saved. He cottons on to the idea that if God can put his spirit in people, that's the only way we're going to get this right. Preempting even Jeremiah, of course, and Pentecost in Acts, as we know, as what takes place there. Now, I'm showing you too that he's shown himself and Aaron to have failed dismally as well, which then leads to the next point. So if Moses knows this, obviously Moses, and there's the scripture which I haven't quoted here, but there's the scripture which says, Moses says, I will raise up one among you, among your brothers, like me among your brothers. So there Moses is already has heard from God in some way, or Moses has petitioned God and said, listen, I'm a screw up, my brother Aaron just screw up, but you need to get one of us, we need another Adam. I mean, you can imagine what kind of prayers went around with that, you know? And who knows how much influence Moses has with God in shaping the idea of what Messiah would come and look like. And I know Christians would choke on their holy spit if the idea that I'm suggesting that Moses influenced how God brought redemption through man, through Jesus. But yes, I am saying that because Moses was a friend of God, and we can clearly see Moses is dreaming up the idea of how do we get this done, because the law's not going to, the law is beautiful, it's holy, it's perfect, which Paul says too, but it's condemning us because the minute it's there, we're almost instantly guilty of failing and falling over it. And how do I know? How do I know rabbis by the first century knew this too? We know this because of the fences, the fence issue of, hey, because we're scared you screw up the law, the actual law, we're going to put these safety nets and create these safety nets further away from the law so you don't even come close to defiling it. That's a group of people who understand how clearly we can and easily we can screw this up. You know, and I know that Jesus fought with the law, with the fence laws, for a very simple reason. It destroyed the the life beat, the life blood, and the heartbeat of just living in God's world happy. Because when you constantly have to worry about stepping over this law and this law and this law, you took away the joy out of life. And Jesus never intended for the law to do that. That's what's ironic about it, is that yes, the law is a hard taskmaster, but it was never intended to destroy joy in people's lives. And that's why Jesus argued. And again, so when people see him arguing with Pharisees over the fence laws, they assume he hates them. And that's just such an overstretch. I mean, Jesus points out that you can even break Torah law if it's to protect human life and things like that, which is so clear in the Gospels. And yet, I don't know why Christians don't see it. But anyway, clearly Moses doesn't spell out in hundreds of ways what Messiah will be, right? He doesn't. We know that. That's quite ironically, the development of Messiah doesn't even happen so much with the prophets after Moses. It actually happens just before Jesus comes. Do you know that? The full development of who Messiah would be comes out of the imagination and desperation and the prayer life, I'm sure, of the various sects that were on the scene before Jesus. That's what's so amazing about this. And so when Jesus comes in the midst of their prayers and their desperate desire for Messiah, and they are doing what Moses did, which is dreaming up, what does this Messiah look like? What will he do? Remember, and none of this is actual scripture, all the ideas they were throwing around and arguing with each other. It's almost like God takes a notebook and pen and says, okay, I'll use that one, I'll use that one, I'll use that one, combines it into Jesus. Jesus follows it and then says, how can you not see me? I hope you get that's what's going on. Now, obviously, I'm grossly oversimplifying it for the sake of time and keeping this from getting too big. But let me prove it again with you. Now I need to take it back and prove to you that Moses does not develop fully the idea of Messiah. That this does happen by the first century. The ball gets rolling to its greatest extent. And to show you that, I'm going to have to show you the statistical probabilities here, or more just the statistics, I guess, actually, of how this works. So let's look in the Torah. And I've got two percentages to show you here in the Torah now, which is going to blow your mind, I'm hoping, to show you just their vast difference. First, I'm showing you 15%. And I'm showing you 62%. Now, if you know maths at all, you know there is a huge difference between these two numbers, okay? It's it's quite a big one. So that's 61.5%, 61.5% difference in something. So what is the difference here? Moses talks the statistical equivalent of 0.15% about Messiah in Torah. That is a shocker, isn't it? So he develops the concept of Messiah proportionally. Now you got to think proportionally here now, compared to what's the 62%? Who wants to take a stab at what 62% of Torah is directly dedicated to? If only 0.15% is Messiah, what's the other 62%? Compared to 0.15% discussed about Messiah, Moses spends 62% of Torah speaking about the law. Now, the fact that the law percentage is high is maybe not so surprising, but just compare it to the proportion for Messiah. It's shockingly different. So while Moses clearly knows something must happen, he had a desire for it, he maybe doesn't get to see as much as you might think, and obviously that would develop later over the prophets, and finally just prior to the first century when Jesus comes on the scene, that's where it gets way more attention and very serious development, which God clearly takes serious given the nature and way Jesus comes on the scene. That's clear evidence of that. Now, Nanda, this is where that question can come in. Where you asking, then if we've got the Spirit, why aren't we getting this all right now perfectly? And yes, the answer actually, for Israel, for Christians, for everyone, no, we are not there yet. We're close to it, and we get a glimpse of it, and we get a taste of it, and having the Spirit to be able to convict us of our sin and acknowledge Jesus supernaturally revealing that to us, and having these glimpses into eternity and what's coming, and having the Spirit get us through difficult times. We are tasting the Messianic kingdom. We get a portion of it, but we don't get the full thing yet, because what's holding it back? Ultimately, it's the covenants that have to be fulfilled through Israel. And again, as I so often say, not for Israel's sake, but for God's sake, for his reputation, because heaven and earth are standing at witness to him too. Is he going to make good on his word? And that's again the thing that has to come about before the full realization. So even Jeremiah's prophecies, which first has to be fulfilled in Israel. So none can a Gentile honestly get the fullness of the Spirit before all of Israel gets the fullness of the Spirit? Of course not. And when I say all of Israel, I don't mean every living Jew is going to accept Jesus, because we know that's not the case any more than every living Gentile will accept Jesus. So that's not what all Israel means. It just means representatives from all the 12 tribes. So now why all this obsession about the 12 tribes? Why must there be all Israel saved as representatives from all the 12 tribes? My next slide will give a hint at why, while showing that Jacob was actually a prophet even before Moses. In Genesis 49 verse 1, you might have slipped over this when you've read it before. Then Jacob called his sons, that's the 12, Gather yourselves together that I may tell you what shall happen to you in days to come. Do you get that? Who says that? You know who says that? A prophet says that. Jacob is going to prophesy the history of Israel to his sons, who carry the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. And until all of this that Jacob prophesies over his sons comes to pass, the Messianic kingdom couldn't happen. And it's still not done, even today. So the Messianic kingdom cannot happen because those things need to happen. Or Jacob would be a false prophet, which would reflect badly on God, who has given him this gifting and put the Spirit on him to say these things. So ultimately, it comes back to God's reputation. So, Nande, I hope that answers the question. The reason why it can't be fully realized is because we are not there yet. We are not in the kingdom, and we won't be in the kingdom until we see all of Israel, remnant. When I say all Israel, meaning each of Jacob's sons, offspring, coming to acceptance of Jesus, which ties in so beautifully with the 144,000 witnesses of Revelation. There's some of the final evidence. When all of those men are filled with the Spirit and they prophesy and they speak about Jesus, you can bet it's about to happen. Seems simple enough when you
Pete, I have a
actually
question.
speak of it. Yeah.
Would you say then, I don't know if this specifically Israel, so I'm talking about Jews now, but also Gentiles to a lesser degree, Messianic Gentiles. Um, are we more capable? Because we got, again, it's just a little glimmer. Are we more capable? Okay, let me say, is Israel, Messianic Jews, more capable of keeping the law than priests, before the second Pentecost event? Is that something that can be said then?
No, not at all.
Even though we haven't gotten the full promise yet.
No, definitely not. Because the problem is what we all have in common, even if it's not our DNA, like in being from Israel, that not everyone is. That's what we all got in common. We're all born to the same Adam who brought the same destruction on all of mankind. So Jews aren't any better at being human than non-Jews are at being human. So we all, and that's why Paul will say the same, no matter who you are. And that's again where Christians get it mixed up. Oh, it doesn't matter if you're Jew or Gentile, we all stand condemned. Oh, you see, Jews don't matter anymore. No, well, you're misreading Paul. We are all in the same boat. You know, the fact that God has said to Jews, hey, I'm keeping the spotlight on you. So I'm going to just see your screw ups more often and hit you for it. That's the difference. But we all screw up equally, and no one is any more capable or less capable of keeping anything God's written law has put in place than anyone else. Because Nande, we've all got the Spirit. Would you say you and I?
No, no, I know that. I mean, specifically, are you, Darren, son of Levi, more capable of keeping the law than Moses? Because Moses did have the Spirit, but I don't know what you get what I'm saying. Like, because we
Yeah,
now have the Spirit,
no, not at
are
all.
you more capable than?
No,
Oh, okay.
I don't think so. I think we are all equally potentially going to screw it up. We might just find creative ways flowing through our own personalities. But and here's the thing. So what do I do then? Well, I just plead literally not the Fifth Amendment in America or any amendment in American politics and law. I can only plead the blood of Jesus. I can only grab hold of what he's offered. I can't do anything else. There's no other hope for me. So I don't think the law saves me. I don't think the law can. I don't think me even attempting to keep the law could save me. I don't think any Jew is keeping the law. No Jew is, because to keep the law, the temple had to be standing. You'd have to be doing a range of sacrifices. No one can do that. So any Jew who thinks they're keeping the law, if they are out there, they are daft too. They are just as daft as Christians who think God's done the law, done away with the law, because you'd be misunderstanding what the law does, if that makes sense. And the reality is we are all
Well,
equally human.
Darren, well, Darren, ironically, without the temple today, in the Torah, it states it's like a circular thing. It actually states that you, by trying to offer sacrifices or do things outside the land of Israel according to the covenants in the temple, you actually are breaking the law.
Right. Yeah. So you can't, which again just neutralizes the whole story in any case again. Um, So again, Gary, I think that the problem tends to be on the side of Christians, though, who assume Jews think that keeping the law, they getting everything right. But we don't do it for that reason. We do it because historically we're told it's our culture, it's identity. We priests, we teachers, we have to do this stuff, and it links us to the covenants. It's not a matter of even what I get out of this. It's a matter of this is what we have to do. And again, I think it's hyper evangelical Christianity that needs to make it. Oh, you're trying to get into heaven with your law. Um, no, I don't think so. I think
Another 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 point that I just thought of, I was telling Kerry earlier about the whole Moses versus Jesus thing. There is a very good checkmate for that sort of argument. And that is when Jesus exits for a moment time and space and meets and transfigures and meets with the two greatest prophets of the Old Testament, Moses and Elijah. Now, I highly doubt they were having a conversation about doing something new.
yeah.
And maybe Jesus was having a farewell party. I'm not sure, but I doubt that was the case. But that for me it's again more confirmation for the heavenly hosts to witness, the angels to witness this event take place, as well as in time and space for Peter, and
Have
a few
you
of
been
the apostles to actually this meeting take place of the greatest prophets and then the Messiah meeting together. What an incredible confirmation.
Well, let me give you another confirmation. Maybe you've been secretly looking at my notes of where I'm going. Let's just say that. So I agree with you. So I can't wait for you to see what I'm going to do next and see what you think of that. So let's ask this question again, or make the statement again. The fight that never happened. Gary, you ready for this? Literally, this was next. Can you see it? Have you read it, Gary? I want you to be the one to read this.
Lol. That's all I can say. That's funny.
And I feel like we're like a magician and the assistant on the stage. Like, have we met before? Like, I've taken you out of the audience. Did you read my stuff before we did this? And, well, you haven't. So, but here it is. This is literally where I'm going next. Jesus in the Transfiguration. So let's see where this goes. Matthew 17, 1-3. So we know this, and like Gary has rightly pointed out, there's prophets, there's Moses, ironically, but I thought they're fighting. I didn't see Peter say, hey, Jesus, can we put up a boxing ring? Because I see Moses is here, and you two need to punch the hell out of each other here. No, he seems to think they're getting on. So again, I've got to ask myself, what book are Christians reading? Like, because I don't know, I get confused. And then I probably sound arrogant when I'm look confused because I want to understand what I'm missing that they seeing. Because I'm not seeing this fight between Jesus and Moses. They seem to be together. Gary, I think you're going to love this next part. And I think Nandi's going to as well. What happened 6 days earlier? Does anyone, like, I don't know if anyone knows offhand. Anyone know offhand what happens 6 days prior to that event?
I'm spitballing here, D.
Hmm.
But isn't that when Peter says he's the Messiah again?
Okay, Nandi, have you and Gary been getting software to be checking on what I'm doing? Because now it's getting a little bit weird. I'm
Yeah.
al- I'm almost tempted to say that maybe the Spirit is blessing this time. You know, I don't want to get that radical here, but like it's starting to look like that's happening here. Matthew 16. Literally 6 days before this, Jesus is at Caesarea Philippi and he asks them, who do people say that I am? I mean, you cannot read the Transfiguration separate from this. So there's Moses, Jesus, and Elijah talking. And watch the thing that this last verse, that's the big one here. I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Do you get what this means? Jesus was promising them, I'm going to give some of you a glimpse of what's coming. And Peter got to see that. Isn't that amazing?
And that's incredible. And I'm going to go just a bit off topic, but is there a connection to why they go 6 days later? I find that incredible. Uh, is it just it's 6 days later because it's just the time, or is there another parallel to the sixth day being important because the seventh day being Sabbath? Is there also other deeper messages there at play?
That's not something I've explored, but you know what? There might just be. I mean, that could be looked into. I wouldn't put that aside as a possibility. There could be something there, but not that I've myself looked into yet. So, but hey, it's worth it.
Interesting. And they go up on a high mountain.
Gary. Okay, Gary, I'm going to choose three numbers for the lotto. Then you choose the other three because I think we're onto something. Yeah. Okay. Because look what's coming next. The fight that did happen. So watch this. O mountain of God, mountain of Bashan, O many-peaked mountain, mountain of Bashan. Yeah, I mean, how many times can you say mountain of Bashan and many-peaked? It's kind of like for anyone who's alive at the time, hint, hint, neon sign, check the arrow pointing, yeah. Why do you look with hatred, O many-peaked mountain, at the mountain that God desired for his abode? Yes, where the Lord will dwell forever. Please tell me you understand that the psalmist here is not talking about actual mountains, but obviously about supernatural warfare, what's going on. So something about Bashan is a big deal here. And Bashan clearly is into some serious hatred. And Bashan hates Zion. Bashan is one mountain, hates another mountain that God has chosen. Hopefully you can pick up that that's what's going on here. Now, I want to remind you of these two verses. Where's Jesus standing when he says that? Says this, Caesarea Philippi, at the base of a mountain. Gary, you remember this, you and I love talking about this all the time because we stood here where this happened. Quoting Michael Heiser from his book Reversing Herman, yeah. The gates of hell incident, Matthew 16, verse 13 to 20, in Jesus' ministry is familiar to most Bible students. However, watch this, the geography is unfortunately ignored, an oversight that prevents us from understanding the impact of what Jesus said and did in a region, watch here, theologically tethered to the watchers. The events of Matthew 16, verse 13 to 20 took place at Caesarea Philippi, a city located at the northern part of what has been called, get that, Bashan. Shut the front door. At the foot of Mount Hermon. What? Jesus asked the disciples a famous question, who do people say that I am? Peter answered, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Do you realize what's been connected here? Bashan is Mount Hermon. Jesus goes to Bashan, to Mount Hermon, the place where the angels came down to declare war with God, to start paganism effectively, to have sex with women, to create the demon seed, and all of however you want to put that. Jesus goes there to start a fight with the powers of darkness. There's more. By the time of Moses, the giant clans in the Transjordan had largely been eliminated by Abraham's line through Esau. Isn't that interesting? Even as early as Abraham, they were defeating the Nephilim seed. If you didn't know that, that should be interesting to you. This is why Moses was told not to harass the people of Moab and Ammon in Deuteronomy 2, verse 9 to 12 and 19 to 22. Moses' trip through the Transjordan was providentially aimed at eliminating the last vestiges of the giant clans in the northern part of the Transjordan. Check where that is. Bashan. Are we to believe that Moses was used by God as a cleanup crew to start wiping out more of the Nephilim, to hold at bay the powers of darkness? Yes. Now I want to show you another connection. Well, I'm going to show you a connection now between Moses and Jesus. And here's what I'm going to suggest to you. Moses will fight the children of the watchers. If you'll stick with me now, that's the Nephilim, right? Jesus will fight both the disembodied spirits of those Nephilim, which is then the demons, but more so, Jesus, at least ultimately by his death, at least, does this. He not only defeats the demons and puts them on their place when he encounters them, he takes care of their parents too. How's that for a Chuck Norris roundhouse kick to the face? So Moses takes care of the kids. If I can say that, Moses takes care of the kids and Jesus takes care of the parents. That doesn't look like they're fighting each other. That looks like a tag team mission. So here's again.
Interesting,
Yeah,
interesting, Darren, that geographically today, the Golan Heights and that area right on the east of the Galilee, northeast, is where Bashan is. And they found there's ancient, I mean, it's still there, stone, they believe to be grave sites of the Nephilim,
Oh, yes,
the giants. They've
yes, without
still
question.
got it there. And then another another point is, isn't it interesting that Israel's modern history, should I say modern history, since 48, where is the geographical location that the most potent
Oh, yes,
power struggle is taking place? Even today, we've been right up to that border area.
yes.
It is at the foot of Mount Hermon, because whoever controls, look at the irony in this, whoever controls Mount Hermon, what if Israel does not control Mount Hermon area, Israel is basically toast in that sense, because all the invading armies can
Oh, yes.
come through there. The exact same place that Abraham would have, Abraham journeyed from north, coming through Mount
Yeah.
Hermon area in Israel. I've seen so much analogies in that.
It's God's intentional mission. Abraham gets it started. Moses comes with a broom to sweep up a little bit of the dust, and Jesus just gives the blow to the highest powers in that system. So again, they're not at war with each other, they actually are a team. And again, when people don't pay attention to that, they actually diminish Jesus. Now, when I talk about people diminishing Jesus in the past, this is what I mean. Now, look, if I'm going to plug Michael Eisner's book, I might as well plug my own book too. So I want to show you that in my Strange Gospel book, I speak about the thing of mountains. And obviously, I'm writing another book that will focus specifically on mountains. So here's just two sections I want to read to you. As such, Israel would have known even before they stood at Mount Sinai that the gods met with mankind on mountaintops. Yes, I am suggesting that Mount Sinai is not the first mountain to be used by celestial visitors. When you read what Moses wrote about the tower in Babel, it reaches into the heavens, that being the first of the heavens, which is this atmosphere on earth. That being where the clouds form, in this sense, mountains become a picture of the first temples in a way, since it implied that halfway point between the gods and mankind on earth. Notice how in popular Greek mythology you have Mount Olympus. Last quote from here. In Peter's story, we have the theme of judgment and Noah's flood. This is Peter talking about the Nephilim and what happens with them. Clearly, Peter and Moses are thinking the same thing. Then in Jude, judgment comes up again, and this time the mention of Sodom and Gomorrah is pulled into the mix. Here's what is interesting. Moses mentions Sodom and Gomorrah first. So clearly the pattern is evident to you, even if you are skeptical coming into this idea. I have more on the Sodom and Gomorrah issue though. Moses adds to the story the notion of men wanting to rape angels who had come to the city. Does this not sound familiar too? Sexual engagement with supernatural beings is what Moses implies with Genesis 6. And then Moses goes on to explain how a new generation of people is born through Noah and his family. The connections are unmistakable. So, again, I mean, that's just a little snapshot out of the book, which obviously I encourage you to get the book to read the full context of what I was diving into with that thought. But my point is, again, Moses and Jesus are not at each other's throats. There's other levels of what's going on. They are a team, like Gary pointed out before I even got there, the transfiguration. What a huge story does it suggest if Moses and Jesus meet with their feet, it sounds like I'm rapping here, on Mount Hermon. Do you realize that that implies a trampling of the kingdom of darkness? And it's not interesting that in Moses' prophecy in the mouth of God at the beginning of creation, that the Messiah will trample the head of the serpent, and there Jesus is standing on Mount Hermon, the enemy's camp. He's on the mountain of the enemy's camp, and yeah, they're just having a casual chat, like, oh. I mean, just imagine it like it's like Jesus, Moses, and Elijah have all the biggest Nephilim and Watcher principalities and powers like in a headlock, while they're having a chat about, oh, like, so what do you want to do for breakfast, guys? And I don't mean for that to sound stupid, but that is like a aggressive, statement being made. Now, my main point here is to have hopefully shown you that Jesus and Moses are not enemies and against each other. But I hope I've done more than that. I hope I've whet your appetite for more. especially to those who are going to listen to this online, that you'd want to come back more and see more about this and see the broader picture of the gospel, including this weird idea of angels and women having sex and giving birth to giants. And it sounds like some fantasy novel. And yes, it sounds that way, but this is what did happen. And I'm suggesting to you that the picture of Jesus needs to get bigger. And I'm finally going to say, before I ask Nande to lead us through whoever's online to give some quick commentary before we stop, that the gospel has to include all these elements, or you are undermining Jesus. And since I believe no one who loves Jesus wants to undermine him, it's all of our responsibilities equally to tell the full story. And in this story, I just wanted to be sure to make a simple argument for the fact that Moses and Jesus, one leads to the other. They're not in conflict with each other. But that's me. Nande, can I give over to you to get some quick answers or questions or commentary just before we sign off for the night?
Okay. Gary.
Nothing much else to say, but fantastic. I mean, that's just, it excites me because I see so much, just those metaphors and the analogies and the confirmations just keep coming. I mean, I just don't understand where this has all gone wrong. I mean, I know where it's all gone wrong, but I just don't understand it, because it's actually quite simple if you're just honest and humble and really just leave things in its rightful place.
Right.
Salvation is first the Jew, then the Gentile, and everybody wins in the end of the day. But within that, there's a process and a foundation to follow. It's covenants that build on one another. It's actually not that hard.
It doesn't have to be, no.
But I think it's been created over the centuries because of replacement theology. It's created this massive hole. But yeah, that was amazing. Love, do you want to say that?
Yeah, thanks, Darren. I didn't understand Moses' position in our faith before I kind of came to a little bit more knowledge in the Messianic Judaism. So I found that really interesting. And to be honest, many years ago when you first brought the subject up, I was a little bit offended, because in Christianity, I mean, no one's elevated above or even along the same lines as Yeshua.
Yes.
But now I understand he's almost a forerunner. And I just find that I've come to acceptance of it. And it's been a blessing, actually, in understanding the scriptures as a whole, not compartmentalized. So thank you for that. And it's food for thought, for sure.
Perfect. Gary, if I can say this, Jesus does supersede Moses. But I think what's important, where Christians get this wrong again, for Jesus to supersede Moses doesn't mean he needs to be in competition with Moses. He's of greater importance than Moses, and Moses himself would admit that if he was around to say it. But it doesn't have to mean that they're in competition with each other. And I think that's the Christian downfall or the hiccup that's being faced. I'm not implying that Jesus is equal to Moses, because he's not. But they're not in competition with each other, as is so often presented. So that's the mission that I'm hoping this teaching will help achieve.
Is it safe to say that Moses is a type of Messiah, but Yeshua is the Messiah of Israel?
Yes, that's perfectly correct. That is absolutely correct.
Yeah, it just came as such a, when we first broached the subject, I remember being so shocked by it. But it's, we've gone from milk to solids now.
That's the hope. Yeah. Okay. That's wonderful. I'm really excited about that, Gary. So thank you for that too.
Yeah, I think it's just us. I think when you're going through Moses and Moses saying, um, Israel's not gonna keep this, and they're gonna suffer and they're gonna mess up. I think I was saying it now to my friends, like, aren't we happy, Darren's family, because our it makes sense why Israel's supposed to get salvation first. You guys, literally, your whole history is just having to take a beating on behalf of all of us in order for us to get, returned back to God. So yeah, in order of the descendants of the nations. I do not envy you guys at all. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, would you say so? Just a one question. It's a theme I'm starting to see a lot. Just with all the teachings you've done, and just also with Moses now, and you tied it up now again. All and Gary bringing it up now just made me ring more in my head. All the Messiah figures before Jesus. Damon said it properly. Like all the Messiah slash redeemers. The first one being, I want to say Abraham because he's the one who gets called. So even though Moses is also, but Moses up until Jesus, it seems like a requirement is to deal some kind of blow either to the Watchers or the Nephilim, because I'm thinking of David now, who's another messianic figure and gets a prototype. The whole taking of Jerusalem and building a temple, it seems like a big standard knock-on effect attack on the powers of darkness, building the temple of Mount Zion,
Yeah.
because Moses had prophesied that. So
That's
it looks like that's one of the reasons why David gets elevated. Well, not while elevated, puts up as a Messiah figure. He's dealing a blow to the forces of darkness, a big blow.
unquestionable. Yeah.
So would you say that like one of the one of the besides I think even just Israel, if a redeemer of Israel, a Messiah type figure of Israel, then obviously Jesus himself always is dealing with he's always a hitman or for the Nephilim or the Watchers or
They
those
would,
that kind of group.
yeah, they would have to bump into that, or they wouldn't really carry that label Messiah well. Because if you're not from
Yeah,
the kingdom of darkness, then what are you?
yeah, yeah. They all seem to be all the messianic figures. Abraham, Moses. Now that you brought this up, and Jesus with the transfiguration, specifically demons. He's always quote unquote bullying the demons, and then going on when he goes like they're always dealing with Nephilim or Nephilim
Yeah.
um, disasters. So that's pretty awesome. And then also just the last thing I wanted to say, I think it was my Christianity. I think it's in John when I think it's John. It's the testimony of John where it says, Jesus. What it says, Moses came with the law, and then Jesus came with grace and truth. I think the verse
Yeah.
goes. I've always seen that as a contrast, but now, but I'm reading it, but it's mainly just saying like number one came and then number two came. That's what the writer's saying. He's not trying to put them against each other.
Let's
He's not trying to put.
Nanda, let's look at that analogy you've just used. When you think of the number one and two, do you see them fighting each other?
No,
Yeah, in maths class, you don't learn about the way two punched one and then one kicked two in the face.
Well,
no,
to further that point, without number one, you can't have number two.
Right.
no, you can't.
So that's the logical way to
But
read.
that's the thing. That's why Christianity. I'm already seeing Moses. That's the Christian man mindset that I adopted. I'm already seeing Moses came, and then as soon as I see Jesus, I'm like, okay, Jesus is obviously coming. He's showing up Moses. But I'm like, wait a minute. He's saying Jesus is the next chapter. It's the next step. You can't have Jesus without going through Moses.
Yeah, it's they're not fighting each other. I mean, if Jesus says Moses condemns you, that's why I said I don't need to quote another scripture. Like, I mean, that's just
Yeah.
there. We don't need more than that.
Yeah. So yeah, teachings like this are just good because it's been years since I even called myself a Christian, but it's such a detoxing thing to remember. Oh my word, that's something I'm relearning again now. That's not contrasting. It's just literally one man leads to another, like every other person, and that's what the writer of John was trying to push it. But I was just seeing it in a no, no, no. Jesus comes with a new and better thing. But yeah, but that's all. D. Thanks a lot.
Can I just say one more thing before we sign off then? Jesus does
Sure.
come with something better in certain ways, but better doesn't make what Moses brought and got us to Jesus with as bad, if that makes sense. Jesus'
Yes.
better thing doesn't
Yes.
make Moses' bad thing. And that we need to say because of the way Christians use the term better. And I've got to be careful if I say Jesus did something better, which he did, but I don't imply better implies that what Moses did was bad, because it's not.
Mm.
Well, if you look at the new covenant solely, it is a better covenant in the sense that the messianic age is better for it's the culmination of all the covenants, but
What?
it is better because we're heading that way. There's going to be no evil inclination. It will be subdued. There will be the temple. There will be universal peace, utopia. The prophets predict. So it is, in that sense, a better covenant, but
Yeah.
it's built on other covenants. It's not a. It doesn't make the others bad.
It's not in
Yeah.
competition with them. That's the message we need to get Christians to understand. There's not a competition between the covenants or between Moses and Jesus. That's the point we need to make them see.
So D, would you so G for Christianity, it's trying to show that Jesus isn't competing for Moses. What would you say is the message for non-Messianic Judaism, for Jews who don't believe in Jesus? What is the
Oh,
message
very
they need
simple.
to hear?
Very simple. Never talk to Christians, rather come and talk to a Messianic Jew.